Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it? I mean, I want you to imagine standing in a line of, say, 10 people, waiting to see one of the most famous world wonders on the planet.
Right, like something you've had on your bucket list for a literal decade.
Exactly, a total dream trip. Now, imagine 6 of those people in line with you just check their phones, turn around, and go home.
Wow.
And then, like, a few months later, the 3 people left standing next to you do the exact same thing. You are the only one left.
Which is just wild to picture.
It is, but that is exactly what has happened to Jordan's tourism industry over the last 12 months. So today, we are undertaking a very specific mission for you. We are taking an unvarnished, comprehensive look at Jordan, zooming in on its 2 absolute headline destinations.
Right, the big ones.
Yeah, first, Petra. You know, the ancient Nabatean city carved directly into those towering pink sandstone cliffs. And then just 4 hours south of that, Wadi Rum.
The Mars-like desert valley.
Exactly, the one they use in basically every Hollywood sci-fi blockbuster. So here is the core tension we are unpacking today in this deep dive. Jordan is currently in the middle of a historic tourism crash. We are talking about booking cancellations hitting an astronomical 90% in March 2026.
90%? I mean, that's almost total collapse.
It's unheard of. So the central question we have to answer for you is this. Is visiting Jordan in 2026 the ultimate bucket list steal of the decade where you get 0 crowds and slashed prices? Or, does the regional security picture make it a hard, absolute no?
It really is the ultimate travel dilemma of the year. Because you have a destination that relies heavily on a specific aura of romance and adventure, right? And now it's colliding with the stark reality of global logistics.
Exactly. So to figure this out, we are going to look under the hood of everything today. We'll break down the granular math of the Jordan Pass, explore the bizarre economics of desert camps charging like $6 a night.
Which is just crazy.
So crazy. And we'll calculate exact daily budgets. We're also going to expose 3 highly specific logistics traps that consistently catch people out. And finally, we'll deliver honest verdicts for 5 different types of travelers. So let's start with the hard data. How far have the numbers actually fallen? Because I want to understand the scale of this free fall.
Well, to understand the scale, I mean, you really have to look at the peak first. In 2023, Petra welcomed 1.17 million visitors.
It's over a million.
Yeah, it was a massive year. The local infrastructure was running at absolute maximum capacity, hotels packed, buses everywhere. Then in 2024, that number collapsed to 457,000.
Which is that visual we started with, right? 6 out of 10 tourists just vanished overnight.
Completely vanished. But it didn't stop there. No, the downward trend actually accelerated. If you look at the early data for 2025, they were running at roughly 260,000 visitors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, compare that to the same window 2 years prior, which saw nearly 700,000. So the baseline was already incredibly fragile heading into 2026.
So the system was already starved for revenue. But what was the specific catalyst that pushed those March 2026 cancellations to that staggering 90% mark?
The primary trigger was purely logistical. It was the sudden airspace closure in February 2026.
And just to interject here, like for everyone listening, we are looking at this purely as a logistical travel event.
Right. Strictly logistics.
Yeah, we are observing the U.S.-Israel-Iran flare-up impartially, strictly through the lens of how it impacts a civilian aircraft's ability to safely route into Oman. We aren't here to endorse narratives or take political sides. Our focus is entirely on the mechanics of getting you on the ground safely.
And that distinction is crucial because, from an aviation standpoint, airspace closures are binary. They either happen or they don't. When Jordan briefly shut its airspace during that February flare-up, the immediate reaction from the global aviation and insurance industries was severe.
Because they don't like uncertainty.
Exactly. Airlines don't just, delay flights for an hour. They scrub them entirely because crew hours, time out, planes fall out of position, and the insurance premiums for operating in the region skyrocket instantly.
Which triggers a massive domino effect on the ground. I mean, if the wide-body jet doesn't land, the 50-person tour bus doesn't leave the depot.
Right.
The massive hotel buffet goes uneaten, and the local guide has 0 clients for the week.
Precisely. Tour operators, those companies handling these large group bookings that really make up the volume of Jordan's industry, they suddenly reported that 90% of their forward bookings through March were simply wiped out. They couldn't guarantee the logistics, so they just pulled the plug.
which obviously forces the government's hand.
Yeah.
When an economy relies heavily on foreign currency brought in by tourism, they can't just wait it out, right? They have to pull economic levers. So walk me through the countermeasures Jordan implemented for 2026 to stop the bleeding.
Well, they enacted a few aggressive policies. The most visible one at the border is the extension of the visa on arrival. Historically, you receive 30 days. They have pushed that out to a full 3 months.
Okay, that seems like a clear appeal to the slower traveler, like trying to get the people who do show up to stay longer and spend more locally to offset the missing volume.
That's the exact macroeconomic strategy. And furthermore, they're heavily subsidizing multi-country tour operators.
How does that work?
Basically, if an agency routes a regional tour through Jordan, the government is essentially underwriting part of the risk to make it financially viable for the business. They're desperately trying to force some volume back into the hotels.
Okay, I understand the macroeconomics there, but I want to know what this actually does to the wallet of the person listening right now. How do these government levers translate to personal travel math? Let's talk about the Jordan Pass, because from my understanding, if you don't grasp this, you are literally throwing money away.
Oh, absolutely. The Jordan Pass is the absolute linchpin of your budget. It's a bundled ticket introduced by the Ministry of Tourism. It covers your tourist visa, plus entry to over 40 attractions across the country, including Petra. But the pricing tiers require a bit of strategic thought.
Okay, break the tiers down for us.
So the entry-level tier is the Jordan Wanderer. It costs 70 Jordanian dinars, which is roughly $99 right now. That pass gives you your visa and exactly 1 day of entry at Petra.
Wait, let me push back on that. Is anyone actually flying all the way to the Middle East, driving hours down the desert highway, and only spending one single day inside a site the size of a city?
People do it usually on these rushed regional itineraries, and it is almost universally a mistake, which we will definitely get into later. But if you want more time, you look at the next tier, the Jordan Explorer. That one is 75 JOD or $106.
Wait, hold on. So for an extra $7, you get an entire second consecutive day at Petra?
Yeah.
That's practically free.
It is. The pricing is deliberately weighted to encourage you to stay overnight in Wadi Musa, which is the town just outside Petra. By giving you the second day for almost nothing, they capture your hotel and restaurant spend for another 24 hours. And if you really want to dive deep, the Jordan Expert Pass is 80 JOD, or $113, giving you 3 days at the site.
But there's a massive caveat regarding the visa waiver built into this pass, isn't there? It isn't just a free pass to cross the border and leave.
No. The government is very smart about this. A standalone tourist visa normally costs 40 JOD. The Jordan Pass waives that fee, effectively paying for itself immediately. However, the waiver is only valid if you stay a minimum of 3 nights in the country.
3 nights, okay.
Right. If you try to do a 48-hour border run from a neighboring country just to see Petra and leave, you are required to pay the visa fee upon exit.
Ah, so they are forcing the economic injection. You have to sleep in their beds and eat their food for 3 days to get the discount. Speaking of sleeping in beds, let's look at the baseline costs for flights and camps in 2026. Because if the demand has crashed 90%, the algorithm-driven pricing must be entirely broken by now.
Broken is definitely the right word. We are seeing rock-bottom pricing that simply shouldn't exist in a normal market. Looking at flights out of the U.S. right now, say a major hub like Boston, you can secure return flights starting around $665 in March.
Under $700 for a transatlantic and trans-Mediterranean route? I mean, that barely covers the jet fuel.
It really doesn't. And from the UK, indirect routing is hovering between 450 and 700 British pounds return. The airlines are pricing to stimulate any demand whatsoever. But honestly, the real shock comes when you look at the desert accommodation.
Right. Earlier I mentioned $6 tents in Wadi Rum. I need you to explain the economics of that. Like, how does a business operate charging $6 a night?
Well, the standard, highly comfortable desert camps places operating near the Taj or Red Twilight areas are averaging between $56 and $62 a night.
Which is already cheap.
Yeah, that is already a significant markdown from previous years. But the absolute budget Bedouin tents are indeed listing for $6 to $24.
See, I have a theory on this. A $6 bed isn't a hospitality product. It's a loss leader.
You are absolutely right. It is a loss leader designed to capture a captive audience. The camp isn't making money on the mattress.
Right.
They are making money on the dinner they sell you, the bottled water, and crucially, the Jeep tour they assume you will book through their front desk once you are out in the middle of nowhere.
It's the classic cheap printer, expensive ink model.
Exactly.
We will absolutely dissect how to avoid that exact trap later. But before we book these insanely cheap flights, we have to talk about weather. Because heading into a desert valley without understanding the climate is how a vacation turns into an actual medical emergency. How do the seasons actually dictate a trip to Jordan?
The climate in Jordan dictates everything. There are 3 highly distinct seasons for visiting Petra and Wadi Rum, and the disparity between them is extreme. The ultimate sweet spots are the shoulder seasons: spring from March through May, and autumn from September through November.
What makes those windows the sweet spot? Why are they better?
It is the perfect equilibrium of temperature. You're experiencing daytime highs between 20 and 28 degrees Celsius.
Which is like what, 68 to 82 Fahrenheit?
Exactly. So you can comfortably hike all day in a t-shirt, but you aren't actively battling heat stroke. In the spring, you also get the added visual phenomenon of wildflowers blooming directly out of the sandstone crevices inside the sick.
Wait, really? Wildflowers in the desert rock?
Yeah, it softens the entire landscape. It's beautiful.
And the autumn mirrors that.
Yes, just in reverse. The days are cooling down from the brutal summer peak, and the desert nights haven't yet plunged into winter freezing. It is highly manageable.
Okay, so let's talk about the danger zone. Summer. Because I think people hear desert and assume it's always hot, but they deeply underestimate what hot means in a stone canyon.
Summer, which is June through August, is genuinely brutal. In Wadi Musa, the ambient air temperature regularly sits between 35 and 42 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
And out in Wadi Rum, the midday sun easily pushes past 45 degrees.
I want to paint a picture of what that actually feels like for you listening right now. Think about hiking the Monastery Trail in Petra. It involves climbing 800 uneven steps carved directly into the mountain. If you do that in August, it is literally like walking on a treadmill inside a pizza oven.
And the pizza oven analogy is scientifically accurate. It is about thermal mass.
Yeah.
The towering sandstone walls of Petra absorb the solar radiation all morning, and by midday, they are radiating that heat back at you from all sides. The canyon literally traps the air. It isn't just uncomfortable. If you're not managing your hydration and electrolytes meticulously, it is a severe physical risk.
Which means if you go in August, you are essentially forced to do all your exploring between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., and then retreat to air conditioning for the rest of the day. You lose half your trip. So what is the third season?
Winter, running December through February. This is what we call the floor. Out in Wadi Rum, the nighttime temperatures drop to near freezing. Remember, you are sleeping in a tent.
Yikes.
Yeah, the cold penetrates everything.
So you have the sweet spot, the pizza oven, and the freezer. How does this weather curve track against those algorithm-driven flight prices we talked about?
Well, the flight pricing maps directly onto the weather and global holiday patterns. We noted March is the lowest at $665 from Boston. As you move into July, despite the oppressive heat, the broader global summer holiday season pushes that baseline up to around $1,020.
Paying more to sweat more.
Pretty much. And it peaks in December, tracking with the winter holidays, at roughly $1,328 from the U.S.
So the absolute optimal value window where safe, pleasant weather intersects with crash-level pricing is that March to early May slot or mid-September to mid-November.
Yes, that is the bullseye for 2026.
But let's overlay the 2026 crowd reality onto those sweet spots, because historically, if you went in April, the weather was perfect, but you were sharing the site with 10,000 other people. We've all seen the influencer photos of the Treasury, right? It's usually a sea of umbrellas, tour guides yelling, and people fighting for a clear shot.
And what is fascinating about those photos is that they are functionally historical documents now.
Yeah.
They depict the reality of 2019. The reality of 2026 is entirely alien to that.
Explain what it actually feels like on the ground right now.
Well, with a 90% drop in forward bookings, the sheer mass of humanity is just gone.
Mm-hmm.
If you walk into Petra at 7 a.m. right now, during prime spring weather, you can walk the entire 1.2-kilometer length of the Sek completely alone.
I mean, the psychological impact of that cannot be overstated. Experiencing a world wonder in silence totally changes the nature of the visit. You aren't at a crowded tourist attraction. You are an explorer finding an ancient, isolated city. You can actually hear the wind moving through the canyon and your own footsteps echoing off the stone. It turns a viewing into an actual encounter.
It absolutely restores the dignity of the site.
Let's assume you're sold. You book the cheap flight, you pack your layers, and you land in Jordan. I want to map out the first impressions. The vast majority of people are flying into Queen Alia International Airport just south of Oman, but Petra isn't just around the corner. What are the logistics of that transfer?
It is a significant geographic leap. From the airport, you are facing a 3.5-hour drive south along the desert highway to reach Wadi Musa, the gateway town for Petra. If you are pushing straight through to Wadi Rum, it is a 4-hour drive.
And let's be honest, the desert highway is not a scenic, winding coastal road, is it?
No, not at all. It is a heavy arterial trucking route. It is largely flat, functional, and cuts through a stark, arid landscape connecting the northern population centers to the southern port of Aqaba. It is about efficiency, not aesthetics.
So how are you actually getting down this highway? What are the transport economics right now?
Well, the most budget-conscious option is the JTTT public bus. It runs from down to Petra once a day and costs about 11 JOD, or 15 US dollars. It is a modern air-conditioned coach, but you are entirely beholden to their single daily schedule.
Which really doesn't work if your flight lands at 2 p.m. What if you need flexibility?
You can hire a private taxi directly from the airport to Wadi Musa that will run you between 100 and 130 US dollars one way. But the real 2026 anomaly is in the car rental market.
I was looking at this data, and it is fascinating. Walk us through why renting a car is suddenly so viable.
It comes back to the sudden collapse in demand. Rental fleets are built for peak volume. When 90% of the volume vanishes, those companies cannot simply sell off their fleets overnight in a depressed local economy.
Right, nobody's buying.
Exactly. They are stuck with hundreds of idle assets depreciating on airport lots.
So they slash rates to cover basic holding costs.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can secure a rental car right now out of Oman, starting around 35 US dollars a day. If there are 2 or more of you traveling, self-driving becomes incredibly economical and gives you total autonomy over your schedule.
So you rent the car for $35, drive the 3.5 hours, and arrive. Let's talk about the sensory hit of actually entering these places, because it isn't just pulling up to a museum. It is an overwhelming physical transition. Describe the approach to Petra.
The genius of Petra is its natural defense, which creates this incredible dramatic buildup. You don't just see the city from a distance. You have to walk through the sick. It is a natural geological fault line, a gorge that is 1.2 kilometers long and in some places only a few meters wide. The sandstone walls tower up to 80 meters above you.
And the light in there is spectacular. Because the gorge is so narrow and winding, the sunlight only filters down in these sharp, slanted beams. The color of the rock actively shifts from a deep, bruised purple to vibrant rust and pale pink as the sun moves across the sky.
And you are walking on a mix of sand and the original 2,000-year-old Nabatean cobblestones. You can actually see the ancient water channels carved into the walls beside you. There is a tangible buildup of anticipation because the path winds so tightly, you literally cannot see more than a few dozen feet ahead at any time.
And then the reveal.
Yes, you round the final narrow bend, the rock walls suddenly part like a curtain, and directly in front of you, flooded with light, is Al-Khazneh, the Treasury.
It is an architectural shock to the system. You've been in this dark, organic, winding canyon, and suddenly you are confronted with a massive, mathematically perfect, 40-meter-high Hellenistic facade. Let's talk about that for a second. Why is there Greek-style architecture carved into a Middle Eastern canyon?
Because the Nabateans were essentially the logistics masters of the ancient world. They controlled the incense trade routes. They were moving frankincense and myrrh from the Arabian Peninsula up to the Mediterranean.
They had serious money.
Unbelievable wealth. And through their trade networks, they absorbed the architectural styles of the empires they traded with, particularly the Greeks and Romans. The treasury is a flex. It is them taking global architectural trends and carving them directly into their own native stone to show their wealth and sophistication to visiting merchants.
It is brilliant. But let's contrast that highly engineered reveal with the transition into Wadi Rum, because that hits completely differently.
Wadi Rum is entirely about scale. The transition is abrupt. You are driving down the functional desert highway, you take a turnoff, and soon you hit the Bedouin checkpoint at the edge of the protected area.
This is the hard border where modern world stops. You have to leave your standard rental car at the visitor center or the village, right?
Correct. You transfer your bags into the back of a beaten-up 4x4, and you drive off the asphalt and straight into the deep red sand.
And the landscape just swallows you. You are instantly surrounded by these sheer-sided, weathered sandstone mountains, jebels, rising hundreds of meters straight up out of the dunes. The sand is incredibly rich in iron oxide, so in the late afternoon light, the entire desert floor practically glows. It genuinely feels extraterrestrial.
It is a landscape defined by immense silence and geologic time.
Okay, before we settle into our camps in this Martian landscape, let's keep the logistics tight and talk about money. What is the financial friction like on the ground?
The currency is the Jordanian dinar, the JOD. It is pegged to the US dollar, sitting steadily at about 1 JOD to 1.41 US dollars.
Are you forced to carry massive stacks of local cash, or is the infrastructure modernized?
It is a mix. You absolutely need dinars for local bakeries, small markets in Wadi Musa, and minor tips. However, US dollars are actually widely accepted at the major tourist sites and by many private drivers. But you should rely on local currency to avoid arbitrary exchange rates on the street.
And tipping. I mean, in a local economy, reeling from a 90% drop in income, the dynamic must be intense.
It is. In sit-down restaurants, a 10% tip is the standard cultural expectation. For drivers, guides, and camp staff, tipping is technically discretionary. But right now, it is deeply appreciated. The people working these jobs are often supporting extended families on fractions of their usual income.
So be generous if you can. All right, we've arrived, we've navigated the highway, we've had our minds blown by the landscape. Let's move to where you are actually going to sleep. We are breaking accommodation down into 4 distinct traveler categories with real, verified 2026 pricing. And one crucial logistical note. Due to the cancellation wave, the booking window has completely compressed. You do not need to plan a year in advance. Booking just 3 to 4 weeks out will secure you almost anything right now.
The flexibility for the traveler is unprecedented.
Let's start with the backpackers and solo travelers. If you are guarding every dollar, what are your options in Wadi Musa?
The stalwarts of the budget scene in Wadi Musa are places like the Valentine Inn and the Rocky Mountain Hotel. You are looking at paying between 20 and 35 US dollars a night, and that almost always includes a basic breakfast.
What does $25 actually get you in a town built entirely around world wonder?
It gets you functional utility. The rooms are clean, the beds are basic, the hot water usually works. But the real value of these places is the communal aspect. They are hubs for exchanging logistical information with other travelers who just did the hikes you are planning to do tomorrow.
And when that backpacker heads south to Wadi Rum,
They should target camps like Wadi Rum Muhammad or Moon City Camp. The rates are sitting between 15 and 24 US dollars a night. Again, this is the budget tier. You are in a traditional woven tent, and you will be walking across the sand to a shared communal bathroom block. But you are still sleeping under the same incredible desert sky as everyone else.
Okay, let's step it up to the mid-range couples. This is for the traveler who wants a private ensuite bathroom, a comfortable mattress, and a bit of aesthetic appeal, but doesn't want to spend resort prices.
For mid-range in Wadi Musa, geography is your primary consideration. You want to be as close to the Petra Visitor Center as physically possible.
Why is proximity so vital here compared to other cities?
Because of the physical toll of the site. After you have walked 15 to 20 kilometers on uneven stone, much of it uphill, the absolute last thing you want to do is navigate a steep, mile-long uphill climb back into the main commercial center of Wadi Musa to find your hotel.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. So what are the targets?
The Petra Moon Hotel and the Petra Guest House Hotel. They are situated essentially right at the entrance gates. You finish your hike, you walk across the street, and you are in your lobby. Right now, they are running between 90 and 140 US dollars a night.
Paying for proximity, it makes total sense. And for the mid-range couple down in the desert.
Look at properties like the Desert Jewel Camp. That will run between 38 and 62 US dollars a night. For that price bump over the backpacker tier, you get a solid structured tent with a private attached bathroom and generally a more refined dining experience around the fire at night.
Now let's look at families. Traveling with children completely rewires your priorities. You need space, you need predictability, and ideally, you need a pool to act as a release valve after a hot day of touring.
For families at Petra, the Mövenpick Resort Petra remains the gold standard. It sits directly across the street from the entrance. It has a fantastic large pool area, which is vital if you are traveling in the warmer months, and they offer dedicated apartment-style family rooms.
What does that level of frictionless infrastructure cost a family right now?
In 2026, those family setups are running between 180 and 260 US dollars a night.
That is highly competitive for a major resort brand. And for the family venturing into Wadi Rum.
A great option is the Rum Gonesh Luxury Camp. Despite the word luxury in the branding, their standard family-sized tents are currently priced at an astonishing 17 to 40 US dollars a night. It offers a slightly more contained, safer environment for kids to run around in the sand while parents relax.
All right, let's look at the top end, the luxury travelers. No compromises, you want the absolute pinnacle of what Jordan can offer.
In Wadi Musa, you have 2 premier options. The Mövenpick Nabassin Castle, which is a stunning atmospheric property located slightly further out from the site, offering incredible tranquility. Or the cliff-top Petra Marriott, which provides panoramic views straight down over the rugged valley. Those are currently ranging from $220 to $350 a night.
Okay, those are beautiful hotels. But Wadi Rum is where the luxury tier becomes internationally famous. I want to talk about the Martian bubble domes.
Yes, the geodesic transparent domes. Properties like Memory's Aicha luxury camp and the Hassan Zawaido luxury camp.
Explain the physical experience of these rooms.
Well, you are essentially inside a climate-controlled transparent orb. You have a plush king-size bed, high-end linens, a luxurious bathroom, air conditioning, and a completely unobstructed panoramic view of the desert. At night, you literally lie in bed and watch the Milky Way track across the sky without ever feeling a breeze or a drop in temperature.
I have to pause on the pricing you provided for this. You are telling me that sleeping in a transparent bubble under the stars in Wadi Rum, which is a globally recognized viral bucket list experience, is capping out at $320 a night.
It's the starkest example of the 2026 crash. In a normal peak year, those specific domes command massive premiums and are fully booked a year in advance by high-net-worth travelers and honeymooners. But high-end luxury properties have massive fixed operating costs. They have to keep the generators running and the staff paid regardless of occupancy.
Right, they can't just shut down the bubble.
No, so because regional anxiety has scared off the mass market, they have slashed rates to capture whatever revenue they can. Right now, $180 to $320 secures you a night in one of the most uniquely engineered hotel rooms on Earth.
The value proposition is just staggering. Okay, so we know where we're sleeping. Let's talk about sustenance. You have to eat, and navigating the local food economy poorly can drain your budget quickly. Let's start with the absolute basics. Groceries in Wadi Musa.
Wadi Musa, despite existing for tourists, is still a working Jordanian town. Provisioning is straightforward. Your first stop should always be the Sanibel Bakery.
Because fresh bread is the foundation of the diet here.
Absolutely. They bake kubs, the traditional large round flatbread, continuously throughout the day. You can walk in and buy a massive steaming stack of it for just 0.50 JOD.
Half a dinar. That is practically free calories. What about the rest of the groceries?
There is a small Carrefour supermarket and numerous local mini-marts lining Tourism Street, the main commercial drag. For staples, expect to pay about 0.50 JOD for a liter of water. And you can buy fresh, high-quality tubs of hummus and labneh for 1.50 to 2 JOD.
So you buy the fresh bread, the hummus, the labneh, maybe some local tomatoes, and you have a world-class healthy lunch to pack into your backpack for under $5. But there is a specific trap with groceries, isn't there?
Yes, the import tax trap. If you walk into that mini-mart craving an American candy bar, a specific European brand of potato chips, or imported soft drinks, you'll pay a massive premium, often 30% higher than what you pay at home.
Ouch.
Yeah, the economics are simple. Stick entirely to domestic local products, and you will save a fortune.
Now, what about the sit-down food scene? What are you eating when you want a real meal?
The absolute must-try value meal in Wadi Musa is Mansaf. It is not just a meal. It is the national dish of Jordan.
Oh, I want to describe Mansaf because it is brilliant. It is this intensely comforting communal dish. The foundation is a massive platter of rice. On top of that is tender lamb that has been slow cooked for hours. But the magic is the broth it is cooked in, which is made from jamid.
Explain jamid because it's a very specific flavor profile.
It is. Jamid is essentially fermented dried yogurt. Bedouins historically dried yogurt into hard rocks to preserve it in the desert heat. When you rehydrate it to make the broth, it creates this rich, sharp, deeply tangy sauce. You pour this hot yogurt sauce all over the lamb and rice and top it with toasted pine nuts or almonds. It is incredibly heavy, incredibly delicious, and it will put you straight to sleep.
It is the ultimate recovery meal after hiking 15 kilometers. And you can get a massive portion of it at local institutions like Alcantara or the Oriental Restaurant for just 8 to 12 JOD, which is roughly 11 to 17 US dollars.
Or, if you don't want a heavy sit-down meal,
You step out onto the street and grab a fresh shawarma wrap from a local vendor for 2 to 3 JOD, about 3 to 4 US dollars.
Now, what if you want the food to be the evening's main activity?
Then you book a spot at the Petra Kitchen. It is a highly regarded interactive cooking class located right on the main street.
How does the pricing on that work out?
For 34 JOD, about
Yeah.
48 US dollars, you spend the evening in a commercial kitchen alongside local chefs, learning to prepare a full, complex, multi-course Jordanian dinner. And then obviously you sit down at long tables and eat the feast you just made. When you factor in that it covers both your evening entertainment and a massive dinner, it is a spectacular value.
Okay, that covers the town. But out in the desert, the food ecosystem completely shifts. You can't just walk down the street to a mini mart in Wadi Rum.
No, you are entirely reliant on your camp. Almost every camp operates on a half-board model, meaning your breakfast and your dinner are baked into your nightly room rate.
And the centerpiece of that dinner is the Zarb.
Yes. The Zarb is a masterclass in thermal cooking. It is a traditional Bedouin underground barbecue.
Walk me through the mechanics of it because it is fascinating to watch.
The camp staff dig a deep pit directly into the desert sand. They build a hardwood fire at the bottom until it reduces to a bed of intensely hot coals. Then they take a large, multi-tiered metal rack. They load the bottom tiers with potatoes, onions, and root vegetables, and the top tiers with marinated meat, usually large cuts of chicken or lamb.
So the fat and juices from the meat drip down over the vegetables as it cooks?
Exactly. They lower this entire rack into the pit, cover it with a heavy metal lid, throw blankets over the lid to seal it, and bury the whole thing under the sand. It is left to slow roast in its own trapped heat and smoke for hours.
And when they finally dig it up in the dark and lift that lid, the smell of the spiced meat and the wood smoke hitting the freezing desert air is just incredible. The meat literally falls apart. Okay, the food is incredible, but we need to pivot to etiquette. Because Jordan is a conservative majority Muslim country. You are a guest in their home, and operating without respect can cause real offense.
This is non-negotiable. The baseline rule for both men and women is modesty in public spaces. That translates simply to covering your shoulders and covering your knees.
And I want to clarify, this doesn't just apply when you are walking down the main street of Wadi Musa. It applies inside the tourist sites as well, right?
Yes. Do not treat Petra like a beach resort. Hiking the trails in athletic short shorts or string tank tops is considered highly disrespectful by the local Bedouin communities who live and work in the site.
What about head coverings for women?
Female travelers are not expected or required to cover their hair in general public spaces or at the tourist sites. You only need a headscarf if you are specifically entering a mosque.
Another thing people wonder about is alcohol. You've had a long day in the sun, you might want a cold beer. How restricted is it?
Alcohol is legal, but it is socially compartmentalized. You will have no problem finding it at the bars inside the larger international hotels and resorts. However, you should not expect to find it at most local, standalone restaurants in town, as many choose to operate dry for religious reasons.
Another vital etiquette point, photography. Everyone has a camera in their pocket now.
This is a matter of strict personal privacy and cultural boundaries. You must never, ever photograph a local woman without explicit verbal permission. Do not try to sneak a candid shot from a distance. It is a severe breach of cultural norms and can lead to serious confrontations.
Ask first or keep the camera down. Finally, for anyone planning a trip for early 2026, we have to flag a massive date range on the calendar: Ramadan.
In 2026, the holy month of Ramadan is projected to begin around February 17th and run through March 18th.
For a tourist who has never traveled in a Muslim country during Ramadan, how does this physically change the daily logistics of the trip?
During Ramadan, observant Muslims fast entirely. No food, no water, no smoking, from dawn until sunset. Out of respect for the fast and often by local law, eating, drinking, or smoking in public spaces during daylight hours is highly discouraged.
So the shawarma stands and the local cafes we mentioned?
They will be shuttered completely during the day. The street-level energy of Wadi Musa will be very quiet.
You won't starve. The major tourist hotels will still operate their restaurants behind closed doors or privacy screens for foreign guests, but your ability to just wander town and grab a spontaneous lunch is gone. You have to actively plan your daytime hydration and snacks and consume them discreetly out of public view.
Exactly. The flip side is that after sunset, during the iftar meal when the fast is broken, the towns come alive with a truly festive communal atmosphere that is wonderful to experience.
All right, I promised we would run the exact math. I want to pull all these variables together into a daily budget. We are going to amortize the costs across a typical travel day that averages out the time in Petra and Wadi Rum, so you know exactly what your daily burn rate is. Let's start with the backpacker.
If you average out the accommodation, transport entry fees, and cheap eats, a backpacker is looking at a daily spend of $48 to $100 US.
Walk me through the math of a $48 day. How do you survive on that?
It requires discipline, but the math works. You spend $25 on your bed and breakfast at the Valentine Inn. You survive on $10 total for your lunch and dinner by sticking exclusively to bakery items, falafel, and shawarma. If you take the $99 Jordan Pass and amortize it over a 7-day trip, that is roughly $14 a day. A shared basic 4x4 tour in Wadi Rum split with other backpackers might cost you $35, and your budget camp bed is $15.
So averaging those active touring days and the cheaper transit days out, you are exploring world wonders on around $50 a day. That's wild. Let's look at the mid-range couple.
For the mid-range couple, the math stabilizes at roughly $190 per person per day.
Break that $190 down.
You are splitting a $120 room at the Petra Moon right at the gate, so that is $60 per person. You upgrade to a full-day private Jeep tour in Wadi Rum that includes a cooked lunch in the desert, which costs 40 JOD, or about $57 per person when split two ways. You allocate $20 for a nice sit-down local dinner like Mansaf, and your mid-range en-suite desert camp is $50 a head.
It adds up to right around $190 each, and honestly, that feels like the ultimate sweet spot. You aren't roughing it in communal bathrooms, you have private guides in the desert, and you are right at the gates, all for under $200 a day.
Now let's run the math for a family of four. 2 adults, 2 kids.
A family of 4 is looking at an average of $180 per person per day.
Where is the bulk of that money going? The major variable is the larger accommodation. A dedicated family room at the Mövenpick resort is about $240. Split 4 ways, that is $60 a head. You allocate a combined $35 per person for meals throughout the day. Hiring a private family 4x4 for a full day in Wadi Rum costs about 120 JOD for the entire vehicle, so that breaks down to roughly $42 per person. And the family-sized tent at a nice camp is around $45 each.
So $180 a head keeps the family contained, comfortable, and swimming in the pool. Finally, the luxury traveler, doing the bubble domes, the fine dining, the private transfers.
The luxury tier jumps to roughly $640 per person per day.
Justify a $640 day in a country where a backpacker is spending $50.
It is entirely about exclusivity and service. You are splitting a $320 premium room at the Clifftop Petra Marriott, so that is $160. You hire a private air-conditioned vehicle with a dedicated driver and a licensed historical guide for the day at $200, split 2 ways for $100 each. Your night in the Memories Aicha transparent bubble dome is $300. And you finish with a multi-course fine dining experience at a restaurant like Aliwan for $80.
So $640, but frankly, if you compare what $640 buys you in Jordan private drivers, 5-star cliffside resorts, and a Martian bubble dome against what that buys you in London, Paris, or New York, the value density is still incredibly high.
It is highly competitive globally. There is one final financial profile we need to touch on: the digital nomad.
The laptop class looking to rent an apartment for a month, what are the raw monthly costs for Wadi Musa?
The raw economics are deeply appealing. You can rent a fully furnished, 1-bedroom apartment in Wadi Musa for between $450 and $600 for the entire month. Local groceries will run you around $300. Local transport and incidentals may be $150. You can comfortably live there for $1,200 to $1,600 a month.
$1,200 a month to live next to a world wonder. But I sense a massive but coming.
A severe one. The infrastructure simply does not support remote work. We will detail this in the final verdict, but if you require high-speed internet and co-working spaces, Wadi Musa is a dead zone.
Okay, we will keep that warning in mind. Now let's pivot to logistics. Cheap trips get expensive very quickly when you make systemic errors in planning. We are going to expose 3 specific logistics traps that consistently catch people out in Jordan and exactly how you can bypass them. Trap number 1.
Trap number 1 is buying the wrong Jordan pass. Specifically, opting for the 70 JOD Jordan Wanderer Pass simply because it is the cheapest option.
Why is that a trap? It covers the visa and gets you inside the gate.
Because it only gets you inside the gate for one single day. And attempting to compress Petra into one day is a fundamental misunderstanding of what Petra is. It is not a single building. It is an expansive ancient metropolis carved into a sprawling mountain range.
Right. Let me explain the physical reality of this. Just walking the main, relatively flat trail from the visitor center down through the Sikh, past the Treasury, and out into the main basin takes hours. But the real issue is the monastery.
Yes, the monastery hike.
The monastery is a massive, stunning facade that is actually larger than the Treasury, but it is located high up in the mountains. To get there, you have to climb 800 uneven, broken stone steps. That climb alone will add 90 minutes each way to your day, and it drains your legs completely.
Completely.
If you only have a one-day pass and you try to do the Sikh, the Treasury, the royal tombs, and the monastery all before the sun goes down, you will fail. You will run out of daylight, you will run out of water, and you will be too physically exhausted to actually appreciate the history in front of you.
You take what should be a profound historical immersion and turn it into a grueling, frantic athletic event.
So what is the fix? How do you bypass trap number one?
You spend the extra 5 JOD, which is exactly $7 US, and you purchase the 75 JOD Jordan Explorer Pass. That pass gives you 2 consecutive days at the site.
It is the most rational $7 you will ever spend. You do the lower city and the Treasury on day one. You sleep, recover, and tackle the 800 steps to the monastery early on the morning of day two while you are fresh.
Exactly. And again, remember the visa waiver rule. Whether you buy the 1-day or 2-day pass, you still must stay 3 nights total in the country to avoid the visa fee.
Okay, trap number two.
Trap number 2 is what I call the Petra by night assumption.
Petra by Night is that iconic event where they line the entire floor of the Sikh and the plaza in front of the Treasury with 1,500 glowing paper lanterns. It is incredibly atmospheric. What is the trap?
The trap is assuming it is a permanent installation that happens every night of the week. It does not. Petra by Night is strictly scheduled. It only operates on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
So if you structure your perfectly planned 2-day itinerary for a Friday and Saturday, you arrive and realize the event doesn't exist.
You miss it entirely. Furthermore, people assume it is included in their Jordan Pass because everything else is. It is not. It requires a separate standalone ticket that costs an additional 17 JOD, which is about $23 US.
So the fix for trap number 2 is purely structural.
Yes, you must review your calendar and ensure that at least one of your nights in Wadi Musa overlaps with a Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And because you generally cannot buy this ticket online in advance, you must physically walk to the visitor center the morning of the event and purchase your 17 JOD ticket to secure your spot.
Check the days, buy the ticket in the morning. Got it. Now, trap number 3. We teased this earlier. The Wadi Rum Jeep pricing trap.
This is the most common financial trap for budget travelers in the South.
I called this the cheap printer, expensive ink scam. Explain the mechanics of how this works in the desert.
You are sitting at home scrolling booking sites, and you see a Bedouin camp advertising a night in a tent for $6 US. You think you have gamed the system, and you book it. You arrive at the camp, miles off the main road, and the next morning you go to the reception desk and say, I would like to do a Jeep tour to see the sand dunes and the rock bridges.
Because you can't just hike Wadi Rum. It is hundreds of square miles of deep sand with zero shade. You need a vehicle.
Right. So you ask the desk for a tour, and because they know you have no vehicle, no other options, and you are physically isolated, they quote you 70 JOD, almost $100 US, for a very basic, rushed 3-hour drive.
So your $6 Triumph just turned into a $106 morning, and you only saw the desert for 3 hours before they brought you back. How do you bypass the expensive ink?
The structural fix is to completely decouple your accommodation from your activities. Do not rely on the walk-in desk of a budget camp to facilitate your tours. You must book your Jeep tour directly with a specialized, dedicated tour operator before you ever arrive in the desert.
Who should people be looking up? Give us some vetted operators.
Look for established operators like Wadi Rum Tours, Wadi Rum Escape, or Wadi Rum Sky.
And how does their pricing structure differ from the captive camp pricing?
It is vastly superior. If you book direct with these operators for a group of 5 or more, a full-day Jeep tour, which usually lasts 6 to 8 hours and includes a freshly cooked hot lunch out in the middle of the desert, will only cost you between 30 and 60 JOD per person.
So you get double the time in the desert, you get a hot meal cooked over a fire, and it costs half as much as the captive camp tour. Book the Jeep directly.
Excellent advice. All right, it is time to address the elephant in the room. Safety. This is why the cancellations hit 90%. I want to address the regional safety anxiety head-on, but I want to do it completely objectively, stripping away the sensationalism. What is the actual statistical risk hierarchy for a traveler in Jordan in 2026?
If we look at the objective data, the consular travel advisories from Western governments and security consensus, Jordan remains one of the most stable and heavily policed countries in the Middle East. The actual red zones, the areas explicitly marked as do not travel, are strictly isolated to the immediate physical borders with Syria and Iraq in the far north and east, and occasionally the southern town of Man during localized civil protests.
And let's look at a map. Petra and Wadi Rum are nowhere near those borders, are they?
No. They are tucked far away in the south and west. They are physically completely insulated from those specific red zones. So if the physical ground threat in the tourist sites is statistically low, what is the real #1 risk on the hierarchy right now?
The supreme risk in 2026 is entirely logistical. It is perception and sudden airspace disruption.
Right. The danger isn't walking around Petra, the danger is the logistics of the sky above it.
Exactly. As we observed in February, a sudden geopolitical flare-up in neighboring countries can lead Jordan to defensively close its airspace without warning. When that happens, your flight is grounded. You're either stranded at home, unable to start your vacation, or worse, you were stranded in Oman for days waiting for flights to resume.
And that's expensive.
Very. It is a massive financial and scheduling headache. People are canceling their trips because they do not want to risk getting stuck in an airport hotel.
Okay, so airspace logistics is number one. What is number two on the real risk hierarchy?
Environmental risk. Specifically, heat exhaustion. If you travel between May and September, the physical toll of hiking the Petra Canyons in 40-degree heat is a far more immediate statistical threat to your health than any regional geopolitics. People severely underestimate the rapid onset of dehydration in a dry heat environment.
Drink water, take electrolyte packets. What is number three?
Standard petty crime. Pickpocketing, specifically when the main viewpoint at the Treasury gets densely packed with people pressing together for photos.
Though, to be fair, with crowds down 90% in 2026, you'd almost have to seek out a crowd to get pickpocketed right now.
True. The opportunity for that crime has plummeted, but it remains a baseline travel precaution. And the final notable risk on the hierarchy is vehicular, driving the desert highway at night. It's unlit in many sections, heavily trafficked by massive industrial trucks, and local livestock occasionally cross the road. It is highly advised to arrange your itinerary so you only undertake long intercity drives during daylight hours.
Okay, that puts the actual risks into a highly rational perspective. Now, what about solo female travel? In the broader context of the Middle East, how does Jordan operate?
Jordan consistently polls and ranks as one of the most accessible and welcoming Arab destinations for solo female travelers. There is a deeply ingrained culture of hospitality, and female travelers are highly common and visible.
Are there specific pragmatic precautions a solo woman should integrate into her planning?
Beyond the baseline sensible dress code we already covered, keeping shoulders and knees covered to deflect unwanted attention, the primary advice is geographic. Avoid taking late-night solitary walks in Wadi Musa outside of the main well-lit tourist commercial strip. But overall, the local community is highly protective of visitors, and solo travel is highly viable.
Let's shift to families and comfort. You mentioned earlier that the terrain inside Petra is punishing. I want to expand on that for parents.
It is a rugged environment. You are not walking on paved sidewalks. You are navigating miles of deep, loose sand, ancient, uneven cobblestones, and steep, irregular rock staircases carved into mountainsides. For a healthy adult, it is an invigorating hike. For a young child, it is exhausting and quickly leads to a breakdown.
So what is the pragmatic advice for a family trying to navigate this?
If you are traveling with children under the age of 8, you must factor in mobility aids. You should seriously consider hiring one of the local donkeys for the steep uphill climbs, or utilizing the small electric golf buggies that now operate along the relatively flat main path of the Sikh.
And they charge for that, obviously.
They do. It will cost money, but it will save you hours of carrying a crying child and salvage the mood of the trip.
Buy the buggy ride, save the vacation. Finally, on the topic of safety, medical and insurance infrastructure.
The medical infrastructure in Jordan is highly centralized. If you are in Oman, you have access to excellent world-class medical facilities and hospitals.
But Oman is a 3.5-hour drive from Petra.
Exactly. Wadi Musa only has a small local clinic designed for basic minor issues. If you suffer a severe medical emergency, or if you are out in the deep desert of Wadi Rum, you require a vehicle evacuation, usually heading further south to the coastal city of Aqaba.
Which means, and I want to speak directly to you listening, I cannot stress this vehemently enough, you absolutely must purchase comprehensive travel insurance. Do not skip it to save $50 on a cheap flight. And specifically for the reality of 2026, you have to read the fine print of the policy. You must purchase a tier that explicitly covers cancellations due to regional instability, acts of war, or airspace closures. If you buy a cheap basic policy and your flight is grounded because of a geopolitical flare-up, the insurance company will cite the force majeure clause and you will not get a single dollar back. Protect the investment.
It is the single most important purchase you will make for a trip to this region this year.
All right, we are rounding the corner into the final phases of this deep dive. I want the unfiltered reality check. We have talked about the magic of the architecture and the math of the cheap flights, but no destination is perfect. Give me the absolute highs, and then give me the honest disappointment. Do not hold back. Let's start with the best moments.
The pinnacle moment you can experience in Jordan right now is walking down the Sec at 6:30 a.m., right as the entrance gates open. Because of the 2026 volume drop, you can literally turn that final dark corner and see the sun hit the Treasury facade with absolutely no one else in your field of vision. It is a profound cinematic moment of isolation that you simply could not purchase 3 years ago.
I love that. What is the next high?
Conquering the 800-step climb to the monastery.
It is a physical badge of honor.
It is. And the reward justifies the pain. The monastery is physically more massive than the Treasury, and because the climb filters out 50% of the tourists who won't attempt it, it feels incredibly isolated and vast. Then, of course, there is Petra by night. Seeing the sheer walls of that ancient canyon illuminated entirely by the flickering light of 1,500 ground candles is undeniably moving.
And what are the highs down in the desert?
Two specific moments stand out in Wadi Rum. First, sleeping in one of the transparent bubble domes like Aicha or Hassan Zawaida and watching the Milky Way physically rise over the silhouette of Jebel Rum. Because there is virtually zero light pollution, the night sky stops looking like a flat ceiling and starts looking three-dimensional. And second, waking up before dawn and catching the sunrise, illuminating the Burda Rock Bridge, which is this massive natural stone arch suspended high above the desert floor.
Okay, those sound transcendent. But I asked for the unfiltered truth. What are the honest disappointments? Where does the reality fall short of the brochure?
The primary disappointment for many people is Wadi Musa itself, the town.
You mentioned earlier it was functional. Is it just ugly?
It is aggressively uncharming. You have to understand its history. It was not a curated historic village. When tourism exploded in the 1990s, the town was built rapidly, almost haphazardly, to service the economic engine of Petra. It is a series of steep concrete hills lined with hotels, mini-marts, and souvenir shops. Do not arrive expecting a quaint, romantic Middle Eastern village.
It is a staging area, nothing more. Fair enough. What is the second disappointment?
The animal touts operating inside the Petra site. The men aggressively offering donkey, horse, and camel rides.
Why is it a disappointment? Is it just annoying?
It is beyond annoying. It can be incredibly persistent and confrontational. They will follow you, they will block your path, and they will insist you need a ride.
So what is the tactical response? How do you disengage?
You must be firm and culturally direct. Teach yourself the Arabic phrase, la shukran, which translates to no thank you. You cannot just smile and look away. You must look them in the eye and say la shukran repeatedly and firmly. It is the only verbal tool that effectively breaks the engagement.
La shukran. Write that down. What about the desert? Any disappointments out in Wadi Rum?
The culinary fatigue. We praised the Zarb barbecue earlier, and the first time you pull that meat out of the sand, it is fantastic. But the food ecosystem in the desert camps is highly uniform. They all serve the exact same menu, which means by your third consecutive night of eating chicken zarb and rice, the magic has definitively evaporated.
You are actively hallucinating a pizza at that point.
Yes. Also, as we stressed heavily during the weather discussion, the extreme summer heat genuinely ruins the experience. If you ignore the advice and go in July, you will be deeply disappointed because you will spend half your expensive vacation hiding inside an air-conditioned room to avoid heat stroke.
And I have to bring up the $6 tents one last time. We established it as a loss leader for the Jeep tours, but what is the actual physical reality of sleeping in one?
The reality is that they deliver on the $6 price tag, and absolutely nothing else. You are sleeping on a highly questionable thin foam mattress. The woven blankets often smell heavily of desert dust. There is frequently no reliable hot water. And the communal bathrooms are often a considerable walk away in the dark. And they are not what a Western tourist would consider a comfortable toilet facility.
Right. So if you are a 19-year-old backpacker roughing it around the world, it is a fun story. But if you are a couple taking your one big trip of the year and you want to look back on it with fond memories rather than remembering shivering in a cold, dusty bed, you need to pay the $40 or $50 for a mid-range camp. Do not let the sheer novelty of a $6 price tag trick you into ruining your night.
Exactly. The novelty wears off the moment the sun goes down and the temperature drops. You get exactly what you paid for.
Which leads us perfectly into our alternatives. Let's say you have listened to everything we've discussed. You are seduced by the magic of the empty sick, the cheap flights, and the incredible history. But you are also a rational person, and the airspace risks, the heat, and the 2026 regional headlines just make you too anxious. You don't want to spend your vacation checking the news, but your bucket list still demands an epic desert and ancient culture. Where do you pivot?
We have identified two highly specific alternatives that offer a very comparable sensory and cultural appeal, but with a fundamentally different risk profile. The first alternative is Morocco, specifically looking at the combination of the Merzouga desert region and the ancient city of Fez.
How does that map onto the Jordan experience?
It aligns beautifully. You get the incredible towering dunes of the Sahara Desert in Merzouga, which easily rival Wadi Rum for dramatic sweeping landscapes. You get access to the labyrinthine medieval Medinas of Fez to satisfy your craving for ancient complex architecture. And you get a deep immersion into the rich Berber culture.
And from a logistics and risk standpoint,
This is the massive draw, especially for European travelers. Flights from Europe into Morocco are typically 40% cheaper and much shorter than the routing all the way to Oman. But most crucially for the anxious traveler, Morocco sits on the far western edge of North Africa. It has absolutely zero active regional conflict narrative in 2026. It operates entirely insulated from the geopolitical issues affecting the Eastern Mediterranean.
okay, Morocco is an incredibly strong, insulated pivot. What is the second alternative?
Go on. Specifically, looking at the natural canyons of Wadi Shab and the sprawling dunes of the Wahiba sands.
Oman always feels like the quiet, hidden gem of the Middle East.
It is precisely that. It is famously, fiercely politically stable. It essentially operates as the Switzerland of the Arabian Peninsula. You get a remarkably similar environmental vibe, stunning, isolated desert landscapes in the Wahiba sands, deep canyon wadis, and an incredible heritage of ancient fort architecture.
But there is an economic catch with Oman, isn't there?
There is. Oman is a significantly wealthier country, and it utilizes a completely different, lower volume, higher yield tourism model. It is not set up for budget backpackers. Day to day, traveling in Oman is roughly 30% more expensive than taking advantage of Jordan's current 2026 crash sale pricing.
So Morocco is the cheaper, geographically insulated option, and Oman is the highly stable, premium option. Those are excellent backup plans if the headlines get too hot. But let's bring it all back to Jordan. We have reached the final breakdown, the is it worth it matrix. I'm going to rapid fire the 5 specific traveler profiles we built earlier. Based on this entire exhaustive deep dive, I want your final verdict, yes or no, and a concise justification based on the math, the maps, and the realities we've laid out. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do the verdicts.
Traveler type 1. The backpacker, the person watching every single dollar. Is it worth it?
Yes. Unconditionally. This is the single greatest backpacker window for Jordan in over a decade. When you combine a $25 bed at the Valentine Inn, a $15 camp in Wadi Rum, the subsidized $99 Jordan Pass waiving your visa, and the ability to eat incredible Mansaf for under $15, the math is unbeatable. Add in the reality that crowds are sitting at 10% of their peak levels, and this $50 to $100 a day trip massively over-delivers on world-class bucket list experiences.
Traveler type 2. The mid-range couple. The sweet spot travelers. Is it worth it?
Yes, they are positioned to win the most. If they strategically book for late April or October, they hit the absolute ideal weather window. They can comfortably afford the $120 rooms at the Petra Moon, secure a private, upgraded en-suite desert camp, and book a premium 2-day Wadi Rum escape jeep tour. At roughly $190 per person per day, they are accessing a highly premium, frictionless experience with near-zero crowds.
Traveler type 3. The family. 2 adults, 2 kids. Is it worth it?
Yes, but with strict conditions attached.
What are the conditions that make or break it for a family?
It is a phenomenal, mind-expanding trip for kids aged 8 and older. Staying at the Mövenpick resort with the pool and utilizing Rum Ganesh works beautifully. But if your children are under 8, they will physically struggle with Petra's demanding terrain and the long 4-hour highway transfers. Furthermore, families are understandably the most risk-averse demographic regarding regional headlines. If a family commits to this, they must rigidly stick to the spring or autumn weather windows to avoid heat exhaustion, and they absolutely must purchase fully refundable flights and accommodation to mitigate their headline anxiety.
Highly irrational conditions. Traveler type 4. The luxury traveler. Unlimited budget, seeking the best. Is it worth it?
Yes. Categorically. If you have the budget to deploy, this remains one of the Middle East's genuine top-tier luxury itineraries. Deploying $640 a day secures you a private historian guiding you through an empty Petra at dawn, nights at the atmospheric Mövenpick Nabatean castle, bespoke Bedouin cultural dinners, and sleeping in the iconic memories Aicha transparent bubble domes. The critical factor here is that 2026 availability for these elite, highly constrained experiences is unreal. You can secure bookings a month out that historically required a year of aggressive planning.
And finally, traveler type 5. The digital nomad, the remote worker looking to set up a laptop for a month. Is it worth it?
No.
A hard no. Even with the rent sitting at $1,200 a month and the new 3-month visa extension.
A definitive hard no. The raw cost of living in Wadi Musa is undeniably cheap, $1,200 to $1,600 a month, and the 3-month visa is legally helpful. But the physical infrastructure simply does not exist. There is zero co-working culture. The internet bandwidth at the Wadi Rum camps, and even in many Wadi Musa apartments, is incredibly thin, making reliable video conferencing impossible. And there is no dedicated nomad ecosystem to support the long-term networking that community relies on.
So it is a spectacular place to visit, but a functionally terrible place to try and execute a job.
Exactly. It is a 2-week holiday destination, not a digital base camp. If a remote worker absolutely must be located in Jordan for tax or visa reasons, they need to base themselves in the modern capital, Oman, where the infrastructure exists, and strictly visit the southern sites on weekends.
Okay, those verdicts are incredibly clear and justified. We have dissected the math, the maps, the architecture, and the geopolitical realities. But before we wrap up this deep dive today, I know you always like to leave us with something broader to chew on, something that expands the frame. What is the final provocative thought for everyone listening?
Well, if we pull back and connect all of these granular details to the macro picture, this 2026 crash raises a profound question about the incredibly fragile relationship between global geopolitics and our concept of world heritage. We have this tendency to treat places like Petra, entire cities, literally carved into unyielding stone, as permanent fixtures. We assume they will always be there, waiting for us.
Right.
But the reality is that our access to them is actually deeply fleeting. It's covered entirely by the invisible whims of airspace regulations, insurance premiums, and regional tensions. When the tourism engine crashes, as we're witnessing so starkly in 2026, the local economies collapse, which is an undeniable human tragedy for the people who rely on that income to survive. But paradoxically, the ancient sites themselves finally get a brief historical moment to breathe without the relentless, degrading wear and tear of a million daily footsteps. So the question to mull over as you consider booking that flight is this: are we currently witnessing a rare, necessary ecological reset for these ancient, desperately over-touristed sites? Or is this 90% cancellation wave a stark, permanent warning sign about the ultimate fragility of global travel as we have come to know it?
That is a fascinating, deeply uncomfortable tension. The devastating economic reality for the modern town sitting right up against the necessary ecological rest for the ancient stone. It really forces you to rethink what your footprint actually means when you become a tourist in the modern world. If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and Aicha.